Hi, it's Katrina! From the oldest known royal library to a legendary city that was finally proven to be real, here are 7 of the most intense archaeological discoveries that changed history. Number 7. The First Leper. In May 2009, the earliest known case of leprosy was detailed in the online journal PLoS One. The new study reported that the first archaeological evidence of leprosy was detected in a 4,000-year-old human skeleton. Additionally, the skeleton bears the first evidence of leprosy in prehistoric India, offering potential insight into the spread of disease in early human history. The skeleton was buried around 2000 BC at the site of Balathal in Rajasthan, India. Burial is uncommon in Hindu tradition, except among highly respected individuals, undesirables, and people who fell into a few other categories. Leprosy no longer poses a significant health threat in most parts of the world, but remains wildly misunderstood. For one, the bacteria that causes leprosy, Mycobacterium leprae, is difficult to culture for research and only has one other animal host, the 9-banded armadillo. Also known as Hansen's disease, leprosy is primarily characterized by skin lesions. Contrary to historically widespread misconceptions, leprosy is not highly contagious and does not cause limbs to fall off. However, it does cause nerve damage and blindness. It's typically spread through prolonged close contact with the droplets of an infected person's nose and mouth. Throughout history, lepers were often ostracized by their communities, and for most of this time, no cure existed for the disease. However, leprosy is completely curable now. A 2005 study of the Mycobacterium leprae bacteria determined 2 possible origins of leprosy. It may have originated in Africa during the late Pleistocene and made its way out of Africa around 40,000 years ago. Alternatively, the disease may have migrated out of India during the late Holocene, amidst a period of rapid urbanization, increasing population density, and the regular use of intercontinental trade routes. Despite an abundance of historical sources regarding the origins of leprosy, which date back to before the first millennium BC, skeletal evidence remained limited. Until the discovery of the 4,000-year-old remains, skeletal evidence of leprosy was limited to Egypt and Thailand between 400 and 300 BC. Number 6. Olduvai Gorge. The Olduvai Gorge is a paleoanthropological site located on the eastern Serengeti Plain in northern Tanzania. It's a steep-sided ravine consisting of 2 branches that are 295 feet deep and with a combined length of 30 miles. The sides of the gorge are covered in deposits covering a time span from 2.1 million to 15,000 years ago. A river cuts through the gorge to form 4 individual beds. But this isn't the exciting part. The most wonderful thing about this site is that within the deposits, the remains of over 60 hominids or early human ancestors have been found, as well as an abundance of stone tools. Olduvai Gorge contains the most continuous known record of human lineage over the past 2 million years, as well as the earliest known evidence of human ancestors. In 1979, Olduvai Gorge was designated part of a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Much of the exploration of the site can be credited to Lewis and Mary Leakey, a British couple who dedicated most of their careers to digging at Olduvai Gorge. Their children went on to continue their work, earning the Leakeys the nickname the First Family of Paleontology. The Leakeys uncovered the remains of several extinct vertebrates, including the 25-million-year-old skull of the proconsul primate. In 1959, Mary found skull fragments of a hominid dating back some 1.75 million years. Known as the missing link, although not a direct ancestor of humans, it helped make for a convincing case, along with similar discoveries by other explorers that humans evolved in Africa. Not all of the significant discoveries at Olduvai Gorge were made by the Leakeys. In 1986, 302 bones and teeth belonging to a 1.8 million-year-old female hominid were found by a team of Tanzanian and American archaeologists. There's something for everyone there. Number 5. The most valuable shipwreck in history. In 2015, the Colombian Navy discovered history's most valuable shipwreck about 11 miles off the coast of Cartagena on the floor of the Caribbean Sea, 1,968 feet beneath the water surface. The San Jose was a Spanish galleon that was sunk on June 8, 1708 by a British squadron during the War of the Spanish Succession. It was quickly submerged and only 11 of the original 600-member crew survived. When it sank, the ship was carrying a vast treasure trove of emeralds, silver, and gold, with an estimated modern-day value of up to $17 billion. The booty was part of the Spanish king's plan to loot South American colonies in order to fund the 13-Year War. In addition to the treasure, the San Jose carried over 60 guns and was one of the Spanish fleet's most powerful warships. When it was finally discovered, researchers, treasure hunters, and governments had been searching for it for decades. Using an autonomous underwater vehicle called the Remus 6000, as well as sonar imaging, the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution explored the site for the next few years, capturing numerous photographs of the wreck. The pictures detailed things that hadn't been seen in more than 300 years, including dozens of smashed teacups and ceramics and engravings of dolphins on the ship's bronze cannons. For now, the billions of dollars of treasure remains at the seafloor as a brutal legal dispute ensues over who the loot rightfully belongs to, including claims by an American-based company that they discovered the wreck in 1981. Number 4. Newgrange. Located in the Boyne Valley in Ireland's ancient east, Newgrange is a 5,200-year-old passage tomb. Measuring 93 yards in diameter and 15 yards high, it was built by Stone Age farmers around 3,200 BC, making it older than Stonehenge and the Great Pyramids of Giza. The large circular mound is surrounded by 97 large stones called curbstones, some of which are engraved with megalithic art. Massive stones used for building the monument were likely taken from the nearby river and rolled to the site on logs. Archaeologists speculate that it likely took decades to build, and that the project was probably handed down between generations, given the roughly 40-year life expectancy among humans at the time. Although Newgrange is officially classified as a passage tomb, it's more like an ancient temple due to its astrological, spiritual, religious, and ceremonial importance. An inner passage leads to a cruciform chamber with a corbelled roof, architecture which suggests that the site was built by a well-organized society with specialized construction crews and the resources necessary for the laborious, time-consuming project. The ashes and bones of the dead were placed inside this chamber. On the sunrise of the winter solstice every year, a beam of light enters the structure through a perfectly positioned window, illuminating the corridor that leads to the Chamber of Bones. Considering the rudimentary technology of its builders, the precision engineering required for this feature demonstrates an impressive level of sophistication among the early society. The builders most likely incorporated this feature into the design as a way to mark the new year. Newgrange has been designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, along with the nearby Knowth and Dowth mounds that make up a complex network of monuments, including up to 35 smaller mounds. Number 3. Ashurbanipal Library. The Library of Ashurbanipal is the oldest surviving royal library in the world. It belonged to King Ashurbanipal of Assyria, who ruled from 668 to around 630 BC. Since the first fragments were excavated in the 1850s, the site's contents have had unparalleled importance to studies of the ancient Near East. More than 30,000 clay tablets and fragments containing cuneiform script were discovered by British Museum archaeologists as they excavated the ancient capital of Nineveh, or modern-day Kuyunjik. Included among the finds were thousands of divinatory, medical, literary, magical, and lexical texts, as well as historical inscriptions, letters, and administrative and legal texts. Ashurbanipal is commonly regarded as the last great ruler of the Neo-Assyrian Empire. Under his reign, the empire underwent its greatest territorial expansion, and Ashurbanipal's domain included areas such as Babylon, Persia, Syria, and Egypt. He was a popular king with a reputation of ruling over his subjects with justice and fairness. On the other hand, Ashurbanipal was also feared by his enemies and was famous for his cruelty and ruthlessness. Originally, Ashurbanipal's brother was meant to inherit the throne from their father, so he had been free to pursue his scholarly interests, and he mastered various fields of knowledge. His brother passed away and he became king instead. His academic passions undoubtedly played a role in his decision to establish the vast royal library. Number 2. Venetian Vampire. In 2012, Italian researchers found what they believed were the remains of a female vampire in Venice. To prevent her from feeding on the victims of a 16th century plague that swept the city, she was buried with a brick in her mouth. She was discovered in the small island of Lazaretto Nuovo in the Venice lagoon. The discovery supports the medieval belief that plagues were spread by vampires, according to Matteo Borrini, an anthropologist from the University of Florence. Borrini went on to state, "This is the first time that archaeology has succeeded in reconstructing the ritual of exorcism of a vampire, and that the discovery helps to authenticate how the myth of vampires was born." Lazaretto Nuovo lies about 2 miles northeast of Venice and contains the site of a mass grave of victims of the Venetian plague of 1576, which is where the vampire was found. The belief in vampires throughout medieval Europe was fueled by a succession of plagues between 1300 and 1700. At the time, the decomposition of bodies was not well understood, and when a mass grave was reopened, the diggers sometimes mistook symptoms of decay as signs that the bodies were still somehow alive. The shrouds used to cover the faces of the dead sometimes rotted, leading people to think of vampires as shroud eaters. To kill a vampire, the shroud had to be removed from its mouth and replaced with an inedible item, such as a brick. According to Borini, the discovery of the skeleton with a brick in her mouth was the first confirmation of this medieval belief. Number 1. The Lost City of Troy. Throughout much of history, it was unknown whether the ancient city of Troy, popularized by Homer in his Iliad and the Odyssey, ever actually existed. During the late 19th century, German archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann set out to prove that Troy was, in fact, a real place. He began his mission by excavating an artificial mound covering a long-abandoned settlement in Turkey at a site called Hisarlik. Today, Hisarlik is widely accepted as the location of Troy. Within the 100-foot-high mound, 9 Trojan cities were uncovered, each built over the ruins of the previous one. Archaeologists believe that the 6th Troy, counting up from the bottom, was most likely the setting of Homer's famed stories. Troy 6, as it's called, dates back to between 1700 and 1250 BC. At the time, whoever held Troy had control over a busy nearby commercial trade route due to the city's strategic location commanding the entrance to the Dardanelles. This would have made Troy a prime target for their Greek rivals. The citizens of Troy prepared for an impending attack by outsiders by reinforcing the city with a wall and digging trenches to keep war chariots out. Around 1250 BC, there was a devastating attack and fire by assailants that remain unknown to this day. For now, the remainder of our knowledge of ancient Troy is limited to Homer's poetic recollections. Thanks for watching! Which discovery were you most impressed by? Let me know in the comments below, and also let me know if you'd like to see a part 2. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you soon! Bye!